Hey there! Tonight, we're stepping into the heat, into the clatter, into the smoke-choked chaos of a place you've likely never dreamed of sleeping in, the medieval castle kitchen. A world where the air smells like burnt meat, wet stone, and boiling fat, where bread isn't just baked, it's wrestled into submission, where knives are sharper than your wit, and someone's always yelling about the gravy. It's a place of endless noise and constant motion, where scullions scrub pots the size of bathtubs and spit boys turn roasting boars until their arms ache and their eyebrows are singed off. But before we get to all that, take a moment, dim the lights, let the sounds of your world fall away. Maybe lie back, close your eyes, and if you've got a fan running, let it hum like a distant hearth fire. Tonight isn't about facts and dates. It's about texture. It's about stepping barefoot onto cold flagstone floors and pulling crusted dough from under your fingernails before the sun has even cleared the eastern towers. It's about the lives lived in the shadows of feasts, the hands that chopped, stirred, flinched, and bled so nobles could dine on stuffed swan and wine-soaked pears. You won't hear about kings or knights or great battles here, only about the grease, the groaning pans, and the unbearable heat of being nobody in a room that fed everybody. So, if you're here to learn something, that's fine. But mostly, this is for those of you trying to slow your thoughts down, to let the tension ease from your shoulders, to fall asleep to the gentle rhythm of medieval misery, softened by distance, and told like a story no one was supposed to remember. You're not in the 21st century anymore. You're in the back of a stone kitchen where the fire never dies. The floor is always wet, and surviving the day means you get to do it all over again tomorrow. Now, take a breath. The bread's not risen, the cook's in a mood, and the floor is already slick with something you don't want to identify. Welcome to the castle kitchen. Let's begin. You are the first one awake, not because you're punctual, but because someone kicked you. Probably the butcher's apprentice, who sleeps 2 feet away from you on the same straw pile and has breath that smells like blood sausage. The sky outside is still black, but in the castle kitchen, the day has already begun, and so have the complaints. Your legs ache from yesterday. Your shirt sticks to your skin from the humidity of too many bodies. And the stone floor beneath you is colder than the stare of the head cook when the soup burns. You are not a chef. You are not a cook. You are not even close. You are the lowest of the low. A scullion. A word that sounds like a curse because, in this world, it sort of is. You do not decide what to cook. You do not touch the meat. You are not allowed near the roasting spits unless it's to carry the fat-soaked drippings to the pigs. Your job is simple. Everything that no one else wants to do. And there is always plenty of that. Cleaning eel guts from the chopping block, fetching water from a frozen cistern, scraping blackened stew from the inside of iron cauldrons. You are the last one to eat and the first one blamed. No one knows your name. You're the boy with the dirty apron and the missing fingernail and the burn on your wrist from when the bread oven flared 2 weeks ago. There is no bathroom. There is no privacy. There is no clean. Your blanket is a flour sack. Your pillow is your arm. You wake up tasting ash and fall asleep inhaling onions. And right now, as you stagger up from your pile of burlap and regret, your first job is already waiting. The floor. Always the floor. Covered in bones, grease, and the faint remnants of something once alive that now smells like it shouldn't be. You grab a straw broom so worn it might be older than you, and start sweeping in half light, praying the rats move faster than your footfalls. Above you, the head cook is shouting already, his voice slicing through the dawn like a cleaver. He's yelling for someone to bring the spices that are kept locked in a box guarded like gold. Someone else is chopping onions with the speed and accuracy of a man who's lost his taste for blinking. In the corner, a girl is trying to start the fire again. She's already crying. But whether it's from the smoke or just the idea of doing this until she's 30 is hard to say. The heat hasn't hit yet. That comes later, when the ovens roar and the open hearth turns the room into a kind of hell with better stew. For now, your breath still shows in the air. Your hands are stiff. The sun hasn't risen, but you have. Welcome to your day. It's going to be long, and no one's going to thank you for it. The kitchen is alive before the castle is. It groans, breathes, hisses, and sweats. It is not a room, but a creature, sprawling, dark, and temperamental. The air is thick with smoke and meat fat, and it clings to your skin like another layer of clothing. The ceiling is lost somewhere in the haze. Beams blackened from decades of soot and spiderwebs you stopped noticing a long time ago. The hearth takes up an entire wall, a yawning mouth of flame-fed hunger that never fully closes. Even in the dead of night, it spits cinders like insults, and if you walk too close, it will blister your skin before you have time to curse it. The stones underfoot are slick, not with water, but with grease, spilled broth, and the ghosts of meals long forgotten. Everything is coated in a thin sheen of yesterday, yesterday's ash, yesterday's butter, yesterday's blood. The walls sweat, the pots sweat, you sweat. It is always hot, even in the dead of winter, but not the kind of heat that comforts. This heat suffocates. It seeps into your bones and makes them feel heavy, like you've been buried alive in stew. There are no windows, only slits in the stone too high to reach and too small to matter. Light comes from the fire and from the sputtering tallow candles that drip onto wooden shelves and make the shadows dance like drunk ghosts. You move through the space hunched, dodging hanging hams, swinging cauldrons, and cooks who do not look, only shout. The clatter is constant. Knives on wood, pans on stone, the sizzle of something dropped too fast into too much heat, the slap of a wet rag on a table, the snap of a twig underfoot that turns out not to be a twig at all. In one corner, there's a table where the meats are dressed, hares, fowl, sometimes larger things that smell stronger than they should. In another, a barrel filled with eel, slick and writhing, half dead, fully angry. The flour sack room is behind a door that sticks, and the spice chest is locked tight, guarded like it holds the Holy Grail, which it might as well, because a single nutmeg here is worth more than your monthly wages. The bread oven is a beast of its own, wide and black, with a stone mouth that can eat a child whole. No one cleans it, no one dares. The cooks bark like soldiers, orders fly like arrows. The air smells of rosemary and char, lard and onion, smoke and wet wool. Somewhere, someone drops a ladle, and it clangs like a war gong. No one flinches. A boy slices his finger, curses softly, and keeps chopping. A girl scrubs a pan with a stone and doesn't look up when a rat sprints past her bare foot. This is the heart of the castle, though it beats more like a drum of war than a lullaby. It feeds everyone, the lord, the lady, the squires, the pages, the stable boys, the knights, the guests, the guards, but it forgets you. You are part of the smoke, the scrape, the boiling din, and as the sun rises and the room brightens not with light, but with heat, you wonder how anyone survives it for more than a day. Then you remember. Most don't. Not really. You start with the onions. Always the onions, a pile as tall as a chair. Their skins flaky, their scent sharp enough to sting your eyes before the knife even touches them. You peel and chop until your hands burn, until your fingertips go soft, until the smell seeps into your nails and follows you for days. You cry, not because you're sad, but because the onions command it. Then come the roots, turnips with skin like bark, carrots caked in half a garden's worth of soil, leeks that somehow carry the smell of something long dead. You scrub them in cold water that never looks clean and set them out to be judged, measured, or discarded with a grunt from someone higher up the chain. The meat arrives next, and this is where things go from unpleasant to medieval. It's not butchered yet. That's your job, or rather, the butcher's apprentice shoves it toward you, and you hold it steady while he swings the cleaver with the enthusiasm of someone trying to forget their sins. The rabbits still have fur. The chickens still have heads. The pigs still have eyes. You're not cutting food. You're disassembling animals, and doing it quickly, before the flies find you. The smell is raw and thick, copper and bile, like something between a battlefield and a barn. You pluck feathers that don't want to come out. You scrape fat from skin that still twitches. You snap tiny bones that crunch like dry twigs. And when your hands are slick with blood and sinew, someone calls for herbs, as if a sprig of thyme is going to fix what just happened. The herbs are wilted, of course, half-rotted, picked too early or too late. You chop them anyway, because this is a kitchen, and things must look like they were done on purpose. Next comes the fish. The smell arrives before they do. Salt, rot, slime. A smell that clings to your clothes and makes your stomach pull tight. They arrive in barrels, half-packed in old straw and good intentions. Their eyes are cloudy, their gills a warning. You scale them with a dull knife and try not to think about how long ago they were alive. Some are still twitching. One flops right off the table and disappears under a bench. No one bothers to find it. There is no such thing as clean in the medieval kitchen. Only, clean enough. You rinse guts with cold water, and they still stain the table dark. You scrub boards with coarse salt, and they still smell like liver. You sweep bones into the fire, not out of sanitation, but to hide the evidence. You don't use gloves. You don't use soap. You don't ask where the meat came from or how long it's been hanging. If it moves, kill it. If it bleeds, cook it. If it stinks, spice it until it doesn't. That's the rule. That's the only rule. And as you pull out a handful of nettles to boil into soup, your fingers already tingling from the sting, you wonder, if the food hurts to prepare, what will it do to the people who eat it? But you don't ask. You just keep chopping, because the Lord will dine in 3 hours. And the kitchen does not wait. In the kitchen, rank is everything. It doesn't matter how old you are or how long you've worked here. What matters is where you stand when the roast is carved and who yells your name when the stew goes wrong. The kitchen is a kingdom within the castle, and like any kingdom, it has its monarch, the master cook. He doesn't wear a crown, but he might as well. He wears an apron so stained it's gone from white to permanent gravy. His voice carries like thunder through stone halls, and his temper arrives faster than the bread rises. He's the one who decides what gets cooked, who cooks it, and who gets blamed when it inevitably falls short of impossible expectations. He knows every pantry key, every cut of meat, every weak link in the chain, and if you're unlucky, he knows your name. Just below him are the undercooks. These are men and women who've survived enough winters and scalds to earn a ladle of respect. They can make a sauce without thinking, gut a fish blindfolded, and taste a stew and know it needs 3 drops of vinegar and a threat. They don't smile. They don't teach. They bark orders and swat mistakes with wooden spoons large enough to be considered weapons. They don't have time for scullions. You are beneath their notice unless you're in their way, and you are always in their way. Then there's the roastmaster, a man who speaks to meat the way priests speak to scripture. His world is the spit, a massive iron bar that turns slowly over an open flame, held up by brackets older than your village. The spit is sacred. Timing is sacred. Based too early. The meat's pale. Too late. It's burned. Get the fire wrong, and he'll curse you in 3 dialects and throw a turnip at your head. If he lets you near the spit, it's not a promotion. It's a test, and you will fail it. Below him is the spit boy, a title that sounds innocent until you live it. He turns the crank. That's it. For hours. No sitting. No breaks. Just slow, aching rotations while the heat roars and sweat runs down your spine into places you didn't know could sweat. Your only reward is not being shouted at, and you rarely get that. There's the sauce boy, usually someone with a sharp nose and no will to live. He tastes everything. Boiling broths, sour gravies, suspicious puddings. If his face doesn't change, it's safe. If he grimaces, the pot gets dumped. If he vomits, well, best not to think about that. He's both trusted and expendable. A strange mix. You, of course, are none of these. You are a scullion, a word that sounds like mud because that's mostly what you deal with. You clean the knives they forget to wash. You carry the buckets too heavy for anyone with a name. You wipe grease from counters with your sleeve because no one bothered to hand you a rag. You are last in, last out, and if you're lucky, you'll remain invisible long enough not to get caught in someone else's disaster. Above all, there's one rule. Do not cross the master cook. Not with questions, not with looks, not even with thoughts, because somehow, he'll know. He doesn't need a Lord's seal to destroy you. One word, and you're out of the kitchen, out of the castle, and probably back in whatever thatched hovel spat you out. The cook's word is law. And in this heat, this noise, this glorious, greasy hell, law is the only thing that keeps the pot from boiling over. So you keep your head down, your hands moving, and your mouth shut, because in the kitchen, silence isn't golden, it's survival. The kitchen doesn't just serve food, it serves expectation, and in a castle, that expectation weighs more than the ox hanging in the larder. You're not cooking for hunger. You're cooking for display, for power, for reputation. Every dish that leaves this place is a message carved in gravy. We are rich enough to waste time on swans and saffron. And you'd better not be the reason that message gets smudged. The Lord doesn't want dinner. He wants a procession. He wants meat sculpted into towers, pies that bleed doves when cut, pastries so delicate they collapse under their own guilt. His guests don't come to eat. They come to be dazzled, to taste extravagance, to chew on status. If they bite into something cold, something bland, something with a bone where no bone should be, they won't complain. They'll pause, raise an eyebrow, and let silence do the beheading. So we measure everything not in weight, but in consequence. One burnt crust, one hair in the sauce, one plate sent back lukewarm, and someone disappears for a while. Maybe to the scullery, maybe to the stables, maybe just gone. The head cook doesn't explain. He doesn't have to. Everyone understands. This isn't a place where second chances are baked into the recipe. Timing is sacred. The roast must arrive steaming. The soup must arrive shimmering. And the bread must arrive as if it were born on the way to the table. Late food is dead food. And dead food kills reputations. You'll hear the head cook shout, 3 breaths too cold, 3 breaths, as he hurls a trencher across the room and you duck behind a barrel full of pears. Fancy pears, imported pears, pears that matter more than you. And heaven help you if you drop something. A plate, a cup, a spoon with the family crest etched into its handle. That's not a mistake, that's a sin. You'll be scrubbing floors for a month with lie and cold shame. And every time the steward passes, he'll ask, broken anything today? Just loud enough for everyone to hear. Form matters. Food must be arranged just so. Meat carved in perfect slices. Sauces poured in delicate ribbons. Bread cut not in chunks but in portions suggestive of elegance. You don't slop. You don't slop food onto plates. You compose it. And if your hands tremble, if your balance falters, if a single smear trails across a pewter dish, start over. Or better yet, don't. Someone else will. Someone with steadier hands and less to prove. But the worst is when they inspect. The steward might come in unannounced. Sniff a pot, tap a ladle against a bowl, lift a lid and just stare. He'll look at a pie like it insulted his ancestry. Then he'll say nothing, turn, and leave. And that silence will sit in the kitchen heavier than smoke, pressing down on every pot, every person, until the head cook slams a bench and growls, "Do it again." This is not hospitality. This is performance. And you, scraping burnt barley from the bottom of a pan, are just one clumsy note in a symphony that must never falter. So keep moving, keep quiet, and pray that when the banquet begins, the only thing they taste is glory. The food smells rich, yes, but not in the way you're thinking. Rich like rot under spice, like fat gone sour, masked with clove and hope. This is medieval cuisine, and no one's trying to make it taste good. They're trying to make it not taste like what it is, which is usually old, often questionable, and occasionally still moving when it reaches the chopping block. Start with the meat. It's been hanging for days. Because they say aging makes it tender. What it also makes it is dangerous. So you drown it in wine. Boil it in ale. Drown it again in vinegar. You crush garlic, onions, mustard seed, and dump it all in like you're performing an exorcism. And maybe you are, because beneath the herbs and broth, there's something faintly sinister. A smell that clings to your sleeves and reminds you you're not cooking with confidence. You're cooking with fear. Then there's the bread. It's not fluffy. It's not golden. It's dense, flat, and dark with rye or barley. Because only the very rich can afford white wheat. It crumbles like sandstone and chews like regret. Sometimes it's served in chunks. Sometimes it's hollowed out into trenchers, edible plates. Though no one actually eats them. They soak up grease and gravy until they're heavy as bricks. Then get tossed to the dogs. Or the poor. Or the pigs. It's hard to tell where the leftovers end up. And harder to care. Vegetables? Boiled to death. Not al dente. Not crisp. Just limp, gray, and vaguely ashamed. Turnips that taste like earth. Leeks that taste like onion and feet. Cabbage that's been cooked so long it collapses when touched. Salad is for summer. For gardens. For people who believe in freshness. Here, in the castle kitchen. Freshness is a liability. It spoils. It invites risk. Better to boil the flavor out and replace it with pepper. If you can afford pepper. If not, more vinegar. Fish comes pickled or salted. And the salt is so thick it crunches between your teeth. You soak it for hours. But it never really softens. It's like chewing on the idea of fish, salty, dry, a little angry. And if you're inland, it's already halfway spoiled by the time it arrives. No matter how fast the messenger rode. And desserts? Oh, they exist, but not as you know them. A treat might be a lump of pounded almonds mixed with honey and rosewater. Shaped into a hedgehog and studded with pine nuts for spines. Charming, sure, but also somehow gritty. Or a custard that smells of egg and decay. Sweetened with so much spice your tongue forgets how sugar is supposed to feel. Fruits are cooked, dried, preserved beyond recognition. Nothing raw, nothing simple. Simplicity is suspicious. Simplicity is for peasants. And always, always, the fear of poison. Which is why the Lord's food is perfumed with so much clove, cinnamon, and saffron. You'd think he was eating perfume. Not because it tastes good. Because it tastes expensive. Because if something kills him, it shouldn't be the cook's lack of imagination. It should be betrayal. So no, it's not delicious. It's not comforting. It's ceremonial, strategic. A battle of spice against spoilage. Of heat against hunger. The kitchen doesn't cook to delight. It cooks to impress. And in that war, flavor is the first casualty. In the medieval kitchen, pain is just part of the rhythm. A steady drumbeat beneath the clang of pots and the crackle of firewood. It's not a question of if you'll get hurt, only how badly. And how soon. Burns are the most common. They come from everywhere. From touching the wrong iron handle. From leaning too close to the bread oven. From walking behind someone carrying a pot of boiling lard who doesn't bother to look before turning. Your arms are a patchwork of blisters. Some fresh, some crusted, all ignored. You learn not to scream. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because it slows everything down. And nothing slows down. Not in here. Knives slip. They're not modern, balanced instruments. They're thick-bladed, worn thin by years of grinding. Sharpened just enough to be dangerous in both directions. You cut onions. You cut eels. You cut yourself. Maybe it's a nick. Maybe it's your fingertip. You wrap it in cloth, or whatever's nearby, and keep working. Blood on the fish? Rinse it. Blood on the bread? Flip it. The head cook doesn't want to hear about it unless you're spurting like a fountain. Even then, he might ask if you finished plating the stew first. Then there's the smoke. It never really leaves. It fills your lungs, your eyes, the folds of your clothes. Some days, your throat is raw before the meat even hits the fire. You cough behind barrels. hacking up soot like a chimney sweep. Then go back to the ladle. No one talks about it. Everyone has the same rasp by the end of the week. And the spills. Grease is everywhere. Pooled on the floor. Dripping from hooks. Congealed on the edge of the hearth. One wrong step and you're flat on your back. The breath punched out of you. The pot you were holding now a mess of shattered ceramic and scattered beans. You don't get asked if you're okay. You get asked who's cleaning it. Sometimes someone faints. Too much heat. Too little food. Too many hours standing. Their knees buckle and down they go. Knocking into benches. Dragging a stack of dishes. Taking a jug of mead with them. If they're lucky, they land on straw. If not, stone. Either way, you roll them to the side so they don't get stepped on. And the fire keeps roaring. And then there are the rats. They bite. Not always, but sometimes, especially if you try to corner them in the grain sacks. The bites swell. Sometimes they ooze. Sometimes they go black. If that happens, someone wraps your hand in old linen and says a prayer. If you're very lucky, someone also remembers your name. But the worst accidents are the quiet ones. The girl who cut her hand and hid it until it turned gray. The boy who slipped and cracked his head and never quite spoke straight again. The man who got too close to the bread oven, fell in, and came out ruined. No one talks about them. Not because it's forbidden, but because there's too much to do. And not enough time, and the roast still needs basting. In the castle kitchen, every scar is a memory. Every limp is a lesson. And every day you walk out alive. Still whole, still upright. That's a kind of victory. Even if no one claps. Even if no one notices. Even if tomorrow, you'll earn another scar for something that won't make it to the table. There is a moment. Just after the midday roasts have been sent up to the great hall. Just before the chaos of washing and preparation for supper begins. When things in the kitchen go quiet. Not quiet, but quieter. The shouting dulls to murmurs. The fire crackles without competition. And the ladles stop clanging against iron pots. This is what they call rest. No one believes it. No one sits down. You lean against a table, careful to keep your weight on the one corner that doesn't wobble. Your legs are numb in the shins but burning at the knees. Your hands smell like garlic and ash. You've been awake for 8 hours but it feels like 3 days. Someone tosses you a heel of bread, hard, dark, dense enough to be mistaken for a weapon. You catch it with stiff fingers and tear off a piece with your teeth. Chewing like you're digging through old bark. It's cold. Of course it's cold. It always is. There's no time to heat anything. No bowls. No spoons. No meat. Sometimes there's a ladle of leftover pottage, barley and greens. Maybe a hint of yesterday's duck if you're lucky. Bones and all. You eat it standing. You eat it fast. You eat it while watching the door. Because if the head cook walks in and sees someone idle, your lunch becomes your punishment. No one talks much. There's nothing left to say. Just the sounds of chewing, slurping, the occasional cough. Someone scrapes their bench back and goes to relieve themselves behind the smokehouse. Someone else uses a rag to mop up a spill that no one noticed this morning. There's a girl with flour in her hair dozing on a sack of onions. No one wakes her. No one blames her. You hear laughter from above. From the great hall. They're on their third course now. Venison pie. Maybe, with cloves and raisins and buttery crust. There's wine being poured. Trenchers wiped clean. Fingers licked. Somewhere, a minstrel sings about chivalry and roses. Down here, you pick a pebble out of your bread with your thumb and keep chewing. It's not a break. It's just a pause. A breath between storms. The oven still glows. The cauldrons still simmer. The knives never left the table. In 5 minutes, someone will bang a spoon against the wall and shout for more firewood. More carrots. More help. And you will go. Because the bread is gone. The moment is gone. And you are still here. The feast is over. But the kitchen is not. Upstairs, they're slumped in velvet chairs. Fingers sticky with fig syrup. Wine staining their lips. Laughter trailing off into snores. Down here, the real work begins. The floor is a battlefield. Bones, bread crusts, clumps of fat, broken crockery, an entire eel someone dropped and no one claimed. Everything crunches underfoot or squelches. You grab the broom, not the good one. That's for show when the steward walks through, and start pushing the chaos into piles that reek of meat and regret. Someone else hauls in buckets of water, sloshing and lukewarm, already half gray before they hit the stone. You scrub with a rag that used to be a shirt, dipped in ash and vinegar. No soap, no miracle, just friction and shame. The tables are wiped, though nothing really comes clean. Grease just moves around, thinned into streaks that shine in the firelight like old ghosts. You scrape black crust off iron pots with a flat blade and a prayer. Your knuckles raw, the scent of burnt porridge forever stitched into your skin. Knives are washed last, and with reverence, not because they're precious, but because they've drawn more blood than most battles. You hold them carefully, not out of fear, but memory. You remember who slipped last week. You remember the stain that never came out. You rinse them in a trough and dry them on your own apron, which is no drier than the trough. There's always one cauldron too big to lift, crusted with something that might once have been soup. You squat beside it like it's a wounded animal, scraping, rinsing, scraping again. A scullery boy vomits behind the smoke flue. No one says anything. He'll be fine, or he won't. The fire never stops burning. The spit is caked in drippings and ash, like a sacrificial altar after a long, unsatisfying ceremony. It takes 3 of you to unhook it, 2 to carry it, and 1 to get yelled at for doing it wrong. The fat trap underneath is a horror of its own. Days of congealed grease floating in what may once have been water. You tip it out behind the henhouse, where even the rats hesitate. And the smell, the deeper you clean, the worse it gets. Layers of meals gone by, of scorched milk and forgotten eggs, of cabbage boiled into chemical warfare. You don't clean the air. You endure it. You finish when the floors stop sticking and the head cook mutters, "Good enough," with the tone of a man who expects failure. By the end, your arms are shaking. Your sleeves are wet to the elbows. Your back screams like it's been whipped. Though no one laid a finger on you, you lie down, not on a bed, but next to the woodpile, where it's dry and dark and too tired to care. The kitchen doesn't thank you. The pots don't gleam. Nothing looks better, but it's clean enough for tomorrow's mess. And that, somehow, is enough. They call them delicacies. You call them warnings. Because in the castle kitchen, the stranger the dish, the more important the guest. And nothing terrifies a cook more than a visiting noble with expensive tastes and something to prove. The food must impress, must astonish, must raise eyebrows and lower stomachs. Flavor is optional. Presentation is war. The peacock comes first, plucked, roasted, and then, because that's not enough, dressed again in its own feathers. Like a ghost of itself. Its neck is stuffed with spices. Its beak propped open. Its tail fanned behind it like some mythical creature that wandered too close to the fire. It looks glorious. It smells like overcooked vanity. No one eats it. They pick at it for show, while servants try not to laugh. Then there's the jelly, not the sweet, wobbly kind that children love. This jelly is made from boiled bones and boiled hooves and boiled pig's ears, reduced into a shimmering cube that jiggles like it knows fear. Inside, suspended like sins in amber, are eggs, herbs, and occasionally the vague outline of something's face. It takes hours to make and seconds to reject. But it's expensive, so it's praised in whispers between bites of safer things. The fish pie is another beast. Layers of eel, trout, and carp mashed together with herbs, eggs, and a crust that flakes like old ceiling plaster. If you're lucky, it's cooked through. If you're not, it bleeds. Once, someone tried to add raisins. No one speaks of that anymore. And then there's the black pudding. Blood and oats and fat, boiled in a casing that you pray isn't what you think it is. It smells like iron and regret, but it keeps its shape, and that's considered a triumph. They slice it thin and serve it cold, like a threat you're meant to swallow. For dessert, if you can call it that, there's marchpane. A paste of almonds and sugar pounded into shapes. Castles, dragons, swans. It's hard, brittle, sweet enough to make your teeth beg for mercy. Only the rich afford enough sugar to ruin a meal this way. They break it with knives and pretend it's delightful. And always, there's meat pretending to be something else. A pie shaped like a castle. A goose stuffed with a duck, stuffed with a quail, stuffed with lies. Dishes painted with gold leaf. Not for taste, but because eating metal is apparently the height of elegance. One lord once requested a pie that, when cut, released live songbirds. Half of them died in the crust. The other half escaped into the dining hall, where they defecated on the Bishop of Lincoln. That was considered a success. You watch all of this from the doorway, wiping your hands on a rag that once had color. You helped build these monsters. You know what they look like before the feathers go on, before the gloss and the garnish. You've smelled them raw, seen them split, scraped them off the floor when they fell. And still, when they're wheeled out, glittering and grotesque, you almost believe the illusion. Almost, until someone bites in, chews, pauses, smiles with the kind of grin that says, "I'm impressed because I have to be." And then you know, it worked. The kitchen has won. For now, at least until tomorrow's demand comes in for roasted beaver tail stuffed with apples and piety. You sigh, turn back to the hearth, and check the pot. Whatever it is, it's still boiling. Whatever it becomes, someone will call it divine. The kitchen is the only place in the castle where a lord's meal and a beggar's sweat share the same air. Above, they dine in gold-trimmed silence, hands wiped on linen, voices soft and slow, pausing only to compliment the seasoning. Below, you are elbow-deep in dishwater that smells like duck fat and regret. Fingers cracked from the lye, stomach empty but somehow still turning. You know what they're eating. You cooked it, or cleaned the pot it came from, or peeled the onion that perfumed the sauce they just called delicate. You carried the tray up the back stairs, careful not to spill even a drop, because a stain on a velvet sleeve costs more than your whole year. You were the shadow in the doorway when they laughed. You heard the harp. You saw the pheasant leave the table untouched and get scraped into a bucket for the dogs. They don't know your name. Not really. Maybe the steward does, because he has to. Maybe the head cook, if you've burned something loud enough. But to them, you are one of many. The boy with the rag, the girl with the limp, the hand that brings the bread, the blur that clears the trenchers. You are furniture with a heartbeat. Replaceable, quiet, necessary, but not acknowledged. When the feast ends, they loosen their belts and bless the kitchen. Not you, the kitchen. The idea of it, as if the walls did the work, as if the fire stirred itself, as if the meat leapt into its own glaze. They give coins to the priest, compliments to the wine, and a nod to the master cook, who bows low but never low enough to show who actually lifted the spit or butchered the lamb in the cold courtyard at dawn. Their world is velvet, yours is wool, damp from sweat, stiff with old grease. Their hands wear rings, yours wear burns. Their complaints are about seasoning, yours are about blisters, rats, and the noise in your knees that wasn't there last year. They bathe in rose water. You wipe your face with the same cloth you used to clean the knife. And yet, for a moment, just one quiet second, you might pass each other. You carrying a tray, them crossing the corridor. Your eyes meet. They blink, surprised to find a person where they expected a function. And then it's over. They turn. You nod. The door closes. You go back to the fire. They go back to their music. Both of you continue, full in different ways. She's there before the sun. Same as you, maybe earlier. Hair tied back with twine. Sleeves rolled to the elbow. Hands already red from cold water or hot pans or both. No one announces her arrival. No one thanks her for it either. She moves through the kitchen like steam, present everywhere. Noticed by no one until she's gone and something collapses. She doesn't have a title. Not really. She's not the master cook. She's not even an undercook. But she knows where everything is. She knows how long the dough needs to rise. When the fire's too hot. Which pot has the cracked bottom. She knows who's been stealing almonds and which apprentice hasn't slept. She carries the kitchen on her back and in her silence. They call her kitchen maid, or scullery girl, or nothing at all, sometimes just a whistle and a point. She answers to all of it. She's scrubbed more bones clean than any man. She's hauled buckets heavier than some of the boys who wink at her between chopping carrots and failing. She doesn't wink back. She doesn't have time. When the dishes pile high and the rush begins, she disappears into the blur, hauling, lifting, fetching, stirring, folding, burning, bleeding. Her feet ache, her back knots, her apron smells like meat and ash. She eats standing, if she eats at all. Half a crust, a splash of broth, maybe a fig if one's fallen and no one's looking. Sometimes, a noblewoman will pass through the kitchen, trailing perfume and lace and the idea of cleanliness. She'll glance at the women by the hearth and say something like, "It's so rustic in here." And the maid will curtsy, even with flour on her face, even with a burn across her wrist that hasn't healed right, because that's what's expected. Politeness in place of presence. No one calls her strong, though she lifts like a mule. No one calls her skilled, though she seasons better than the man paid to do it. If she laughs too loud, she's scolded. If she speaks too little, she's forgotten. If she makes a mistake, it's because she's a girl. If she does it perfectly, well, of course she did. She's been doing it forever. Hasn't she? She helps birth meals that feed lords and knights and bishops. But she'll never sit at the table. She'll never see the hall lit with torches. Never hear the toast to the roast she basted with her own hands. She'll just hear about it secondhand, from the boy who delivered the platter, while she's washing the platter's grease from her arms. At the end of the day, when the men go out back to drink and the boys fall asleep on sacks of flour, she keeps going, folding cloths, wiping knives, braiding her hair back tight for tomorrow. And when someone says, "Women don't belong in the kitchen," she just laughs under her breath. Not bitter, just tired, because she's been in the kitchen all along. The kitchen was built around her. It runs on her, and no one even noticed. It's dark by the time you stop. Not twilight, not dusk, dark, the kind of dark where the candles have melted into puddles. The hearth is just a breath of orange, and even the rats have called it a night. You don't remember the last time you sat. Maybe before breakfast, maybe never. Your knees feel like they belong to someone much older, someone who made different choices. Your hands are raw. One of your fingers is still bleeding through the cloth you wrapped it in hours ago. You were going to change it. You forgot. The last pot is done. Not clean. Exactly, just empty. Scraped, rinsed, passed off as good enough. The ladles hang like limp flags. The floor has been swept 3 times and still crunches underfoot. Somewhere behind you, a stack of trenchers collapsed with a soft thud that no one reacts to. You don't even turn your head. The kitchen is quiet now, but not peaceful, just emptied of noise, the kind of silence that comes after something violent. Pans lean against walls like tired soldiers. A chicken bone floats in a bucket of water. There's gravy on your sleeve from a dish no one complimented. There's ash in your hair. You might have cried at some point during the second course, but it's hard to tell. Your face is stiff with sweat and flour. And tears don't matter here. You wipe the table slowly, not because it needs it, but because you're not ready to stop moving. Stopping means feeling everything all at once. The bruises, the hunger, the day. Someone is asleep under the spice shelf, curled up with a sack of turnips like it's a feather bed. Another scullion is picking meat from a leftover bone, eyes glazed, chewing without tasting. The head cook is long gone. He left after shouting something that might have been praise, or just exhaustion dressed up like authority. Either way, he's not here, and the kitchen is too tired to care. You drink from the water bucket, warm and metallic, and it tastes like the bottom of a spoon. Then you find your corner, your pile of sacks, your folded apron, your one square of quiet. You don't change clothes. You don't take off your shoes. You lie down fully clothed, crusted with the day, and stare at the ceiling until the flicker of the last fire fades. No dreams, no thoughts, just the weight of breath and heat and knowing that in 5 hours, the bells will ring again, the fire will be stoked, the onions will be waiting, and so will you. But for now, for this one thin sliver of night, you are finished. Not rested, not comforted, just done. And that's the closest thing to peace you're going to get. So now you've made it, barely. One full day in a medieval castle kitchen. And your back feels like it's aged a decade. Your hands ache in places you didn't know had muscles. You smell like onion, wood smoke, and something you'd rather not identify. You've been burned, shouted at, ignored, and possibly stepped on. You've served people who will never know your name, cleaned things that should have been buried, and watched food you sweated over fed to dogs, tossed to pigs, or simply forgotten. But still, you survived. And maybe that's the point. In this kitchen, survival is its own strange badge of honor. There's no applause, no moment of triumph, no one clapping your shoulder to say, "Well done, lad," just the quiet knowledge that you didn't faint. Didn't quit, didn't set anything on fire you weren't supposed to. The roast made it to the table. The bread didn't break teeth. The pot didn't boil over. Well, not again. You did it. And tomorrow, when the bells ring and the cook yells and the fire groans back to life, you'll do it again. Because someone has to. Because the kitchen doesn't stop. Because this strange, blistering machine of grease and noise and motion depends on hands like yours. Calloused, quiet, half-forgotten hands, the kind that keep the world running while the world isn't looking. So rest now, if you can. The fire's dying, the knives are clean, the floor is almost dry, and for the next few hours, the kitchen sleeps, just like you should.